All right, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the Chrissie Mayr podcast. We're coming to you live. This is very exciting. We're doing them more live more often, which I enjoy. And if you're listening on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, or SoundCloud, please go ahead and give us a 5-star review. I very much appreciate all the reviews that we have had so far. A quick shout out to some stand-up dates coming up. I'm going to be back on the Jersey Shore in Point Pleasant Beach, New Jersey, at Uncle Vinny's Comedy Club, July 17th. And then Jinx on the boardwalk, right on the boardwalk there at Point Pleasant Beach, July 20th. And then I'll be in New Orleans, August 13th and 14th, Vegas with Comedians of the Compound, September 10th and 11th, and back in Dallas at Hyenas Comedy Club, September 17th and 18th. So excited to be doing all this stand-up. It makes me feel alive. You know what else makes me feel alive? Smoking CBD. I want to talk to you guys about Cushy Dreams. They are my go-to for all things CBD related. They offer a full lineup of premium smokable CBD. They specialize in CBD-rich hemp flower, bud in cans, and pre-roll CBD joints. Tastes great. It's exactly like high-quality weed, but you're not going to get high. You can enjoy all the health benefits of CBD without getting high. It's 0.3% THC in all of these products. It helps you sleep if you're an anxious sleeper. If you're just an anxious person in general, which I was for a lot of last year. But then I started smoking my CBD and I felt chill as heck. It's cannabis that ships directly to you. It's legal in all 50 states. Join the men and women who are sick of vapes and gummies and want to smoke their CBD. Cushy Dreams. Smoke your CBD. 100% hand trimmed, never machine trimmed. They do independent lab tests that you can check out on their website, cushydreams.com, KUSHY dreams.com. And best of all, it's grown here in the USA. Maximum freshness, flavor, and cannabinoids. And best of all, they've got different indica sativa blends like Relax, Dream, Energy, Peace, Hustle. I think that's all of them. There's a lot. So if you want to be a little bit more up, you do like an indica. If you want to be a little bit more down, you do like a sativa. I think I'm getting that right. So go to cushydreams.com and use promo code CMP. You are going to get 20% off every order. First, second, third, fourth, 100th. It's great. It's good stuff, guys. All right. I'm so excited to have this guy on the podcast today. He's upset with how long it took me to ask him to get him on. He's somebody I thought of right away and think of all the time, but just maybe my ADD or just not being organized. But I'm so happy that he's here with us tonight. He's comedian, writer, producer. He was the warm-up comic for 17 years on Letterman. So he's just a wealth of knowledge, a comedy legend, icon, all that good stuff. Eddie Brill.
Hey, yay, ten. I even put out a new T-shirt for you.
Wow, I feel honored.
In case you have smell-o-vision or anything like that, where people can smell it.
Yeah, they have to pay extra for smell-o-vision.
Yeah.
So yeah. How have you been, Eddie? I haven't seen you in years. I think the last time I saw you was at one of your famous poker games. I don't know if you still have those.
We do, but it's very rare that we have them. You know, a lot of people have moved out of New York. A lot of, New Yorkers were in those games. I have a photo that I found of me, you, and Wendy Liebman, I think it was, in the bottom of Gotham. It's a great photo of us.
Ooh.
Yeah. It was way back when we were doing a show downstairs in the Visage room or whatever. And I think that's the last time we hung. But yeah, no, the poker game was gone on for like 20 something years. And it started, I was hosting Caroline's every Monday night and for a long time. And we'd have a game as soon as my show was over. I'd go home and the game was set up and we played till like 5 a.m. and whoever won would buy everyone else breakfast. So it was a lot of laughing, a lot of fun. And everyone, was all top name comics from around the world. And it was so popular, we put a second game in my apartment and then we added a Sega and a Nintendo, and my place was like a palace.
Like an adult Chuck E. Cheese. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Minus the cheese. And
when did the game start? And were you the first person to host them?
They used to do them at the comic strip, and Dennis Regan was sort of, running the games over there. And then he was moving. He gave me his table, and that said, why don't we do it at Eddie's house? And that's how that kind of started.
Oh,
And William Stevenson really had my keys. And so he would start the game. Like I said, I'd be done at Caroline's at, I don't know, 9 o'clock, and I'd get home and the game was set up and it was in motion. And, on my street, Sarah Silverman lived there, and Todd
really?
and
Wow.
Neil Brennan, and, Mark Maron. Everyone lived on the street. They all played.
Really? Oh, I had no
Quinn.
idea it was such a who's who.
At one time, it was who's who. It was Liz Winstead and Louis C.K. and Sam,
Wow.
Sarowitz and Sam Sater. Sam Sater was the guy I went to college with. And then all of a sudden, the word got out in Europe that this game was going on. So if a comedian from England or Ireland or Scotland was coming over, they'd call. And then William started a newsletter. So people would write in and they'd say, hey, I'm going to be in town. I want to play in the game. It became a thing. It was good.
And you didn't have to be good.
No, you didn't have to be good. And you didn't have to really, some people took it really seriously and that was okay, but you just really had to, have fun. And, people would make, set lists of music, and it was really great. It was really fun. And it was at my house. And everyone was really good at cleaning up, which you would think that wasn't a thing.
I remember the one time I was there. Yeah, I was very impressed. I was like, I have never seen this many straight men cleaning up, I think, ever.
Yeah. And so it was, it was cool. And it was in my home. So when the end of the night, I was having the CBD with the, the stuff that made you high.
Yeah.
I would just go to bed. It was right there. It was kind of convenient.
Would you wait till the last person left to go to bed, or would you be like, all right, guys, I'm going in here now?
Yeah, I would wait. A couple of times I might have passed out. I don't remember because I passed out, so I wouldn't remember. But a lot of tomfoolery, and but it was really fun and really funny. And it was a good one. You're in the comedy clubs and it's great, and everyone's doing their sets and worried about this. And you come over to my house, you didn't have to worry about anything except just laughing, and nothing wrong with that.
And it's no pressure, no stakes, and some people end up being even funnier, under those circumstances, and it really shows you who the people truly are. Man, there's just, we were laughing the whole time. I think you guys were singing, you had all these funny, silly songs that you all knew.
Yeah, they just, the games would have certain names. They would, turn, there was a game called $50 Free, it was called. And eventually, without telling the whole story, it became Biddy Bada Bow. And we just Biddy Bada Bow, and everyone would know it. And you say bow, and people would come over and go, what the fuck's wrong with these people? Why are they saying Biddy Bada and bow? And, there was, there was all these songs that when I was starting out in college, I had a roommate named Chris Phillips, and Chris still is my best friend. And we've made a lot of crazy songs over the years. He actually wrote the Asshole song with Dennis Leary. And, so Chris has a lot of experience with music, and him and I wrote music for a lot of different things. And I would bring some of those songs to the table and people would start singing them and knowing them. And it was silly. And we would have names for people. And, there was a guy named Adam who was Sarah Silverman's cousin, and everyone would go cock every time because he was such a annoying player, and his name became Cockman, and that was his name.
Is he Jewish? Cockman? Yeah.
Yeah, and he was married to this lovely Italian woman, and she loved that his name was Cockman. She called herself Mrs. Cockman. She would come up, she would send emails. Cockman can't make it. Well, signed Mrs. Cockman, and it became normal. The weird stuff became normal, and I can't even think of them because they're just normal. There was but it was the main thing, like you said. People played for money. It was for money, but it was a low amount, so no one ever got killed because we played every week.
What's the most a comic won?
The most I once won $330.
Not too
and that
shabby.
was that was a lot for us. That was huge. And the most I ever lost, I think, was 100. But people would play with win 50, lose 50. It was really like that. Again, we wouldn't have played for that 20-something years if people were really getting killed.
Right, because you're coming into the city, you're only making, maybe you're making $25 from a spot, maybe you're making 75, maybe
on
100.
Monday night, you were lucky to make 25.
Yeah. Oof. So they don't. You weren't trying to take everybody's spot money away.
No, I made $100 every Monday hosting Caroline's, and I would bring that to the table. And sometimes I would lose, sometimes I'd win, and But again, the fun part was at the end of the thing. William Stevenson would write a newsletter. It was really funny, and people would get it. My mom would get it. My mom loved my mom and William were very close, and they would talk all the time. And William would write these newsletters, and my mom was on the newsletter list, and she loved to hear the goings on of the game. We play like once a month now. We're playing next Monday, I think we're playing, and we're playing at J.R. Havlin's place because he has this palace with 2 apartments in one in the backyard.
Ooh, that's how you know you've made it. Yeah, when you can bust into somebody else's apartment and make it part of your own amoeba super apartment.
Yeah, and if you know amoebas, then you've grown up, and
Who were some of the famous comics that you've played with, or that that were there?
I mentioned most of like Colin Quinn and Brian Regan and Sarah Silverman and Liz Winstead and Louis C.K. and Greg Fitzsimmons and Mark Maron and and then Ed Byrne from Ireland and just all these different. It's hard to just imagine. Over the years, there were so many different comedians Rocky Laporte. There were people who would play in the game, like somebody from LA wrote in a newsletter or something. They said, "Oh, I was at Eddie Brill's poker game," and I go, "No, that person never was."
They lied about being there.
Yeah, they were bragging about being there. Then I found out that I was an idiot, and they were.
They just were so forgettable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, this could really be like a movie.
It was gonna be a show. It would have been the first ever poker TV show. And Rory Rosegarten and his brother Peter, who managed Brian Regan and Robert Klein and Ray Romano and those ilk, they knew about our game and they were going to put together a show. And they got this network to put up all this money, and we made ships that said Eddie Brill Poker Game on it. And we were going to get Norm Macdonald and a couple other people at the beginning had agreed to be special guests each week. And so we really worked on it. And we were not only doing the show, we did pre-production where we'd have, like videos of somebody going, should I pass the 3, stupid things like that. But it was kind of fun stuff. And the day before we were about to do our practice run, the company sold their business and they weren't going to do the new company.
No.
Did the poker game. And we would have been the first people of all of the poker shows that were big on television.
Oh,
and,
man.
It was the Rose Gardens, their idea, and it's a shame that it fell apart. But there was a lot of money thrown our way, and we spent it wisely and really dolled up the whole thing. We had a studio that we were renting, and it just didn't go anywhere.
And then you got to keep the chips, because is that what you still were using, the Eddie Brill Poker Game chips? And I was like, this is legit. You have your own chips, but I didn't know that they were from this TV show that almost happened.
Yeah, the big budget. We were able to buy a brand new table and everything. So we still have the chips, but they're all up at JR's right now. So
well, who knows? I mean, I think it's such a great idea and something so many people would watch. Like, I would love, because people were watching Crashing and all these other stand-up comedy related shows that had a season or two, and it's just something so cool. Like people loved watching, what was that? Like Molly's Game. It would be like a Molly's Game of stand-up comedy, but it's like extremely low stakes and maybe less slutty girls walking around.
Yeah, there were a lot of female at the game, but a lot of comedians. But Vic Henley, who was also part of the game, his wife Robin was a regular player with us, and Carrie Carabas was a regular player. She was a great poker player, and her nickname was, I forget, it was something to do with aces or whatever. And so there was always real poker players playing, but it was much more fun when it was not so serious, where the games weren't serious and all that. And it wasn't, again, it was okay to make money and to do that, but it was about laughing and taking the edge off this crazy world that we live in.
Yeah, and I think the time that I was there, I think both William and Vic were there. So I mean, and we lost both of them, I think, in the last 2 years. When did William pass? Was it 2019 for him?
Yeah, 2019, and Vic was last year, 2020. and they were two of my best friends in the world, so it's pretty rough. And it's been a rough go for a lot. I'm 62 and I don't feel it. But
You don't look it.
when I look out, I don't see 62. But you get older and friends of yours pass. Like there was some guy who I knew pretty well who passed today, and then one of my best
Oh,
friends, Adam, had passed a while ago, 2016, and he was the guy we went to school with, and it just starts happening. People start going. So, and weird thing with comedians, comedians live longer. You get Phyllis Diller and you know Milton Berle and all these people live in their 90s, and I don't know if it's something about comedy that keeps people alive.
yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting because at the same time, a lot of us do live like fast and hard. It's like some of us are on drugs, some of us are like just keep really late hours, some of us are eating like low quality food. Like some of us live in apartments with like 5 other comics, mattresses on the floor because it's a lot of dudes who do stand up and they're willing to just kind of like, yeah, I don't need, when you're a dude, I think in your 20s, maybe in your 30s, you're like, I can go without a lot of stuff. I think that's part of why there are more men overall who pursue comedy than women, because it's like I just feel like women are less likely to just be like, oh yeah, I will be okay to make $25 a day or whatever and sleep on a mattress on the
And
floor.
what's going on? Like with you, you're doing really well. I see all the success you've been having. So you're taking your game to the next level. So it shows if you just stick it out, no matter how many shitty times there are, it makes it worthwhile.
And like, yeah, I mean, I think there's no way to stay in comedy and not have shitty times. Because I remember you were for a while where you were doing warm up for Letterman for like 17 years, which is like that's something any comic, that's a whole career in and of itself. But then 11 of those years you were the talent manager or the talent booker
Right.
for
For
the
the
show. So
for the
you were
stand on the show.
you were the warm-up comic first, and we're like, this guy's pretty good. He probably knows some good comics. Did you sort of pitch yourself for that, or did they look to
Well, what
you?
happened was Zoe Friedman, who booked me on the show as a guest, Bud Friedman's daughter, who's Zoe's amazing, booked a lot of great comedians. That was her job. She was the booker. She got Gaffigan on the show and Ray Romano and Mitch Hedberg. She had a pretty sharp eye for comedians, and she got this incredible job at Comedy Central, where she was going to be the president of King of Comedy Central or something. And so obviously it was time for her to move on. So they had another guy named Josh who took over for a while. He wasn't a comic or anything. And I would talk to Letterman every day. I mean, most of my job was, I was the warm up, but in every commercial break, I was at the desk. And I did a lot of things there. A few times I got to do the opening announcement because, say, the announcer, Alan, called me to the show. And
What?
from New York, the greatest city in the world. It's just, I could do all these things there. And we talk comedy all the time. I was a regular at the Comedy Store in the 80s, and Letterman was a regular at the Comedy Store in the 70s. So we shared
What?
stories.
What? You don't seem like someone who was alive and doing comedy like when I was born.
Oh, God. 19, I moved to LA pretty much half and half in 87. I went out in 1986 to do television, and I auditioned at the Store and the Improv, and the Improv
Wow.
said, if you move out here, we'll use you. And the Store said, anytime you come out to LA, we'll use you. So I chose the Store, and it was great. And then I eventually in 87, I kind of moved out there because Sam Kinison was very good to me and took care of me and got me a lot of work. And Mitzi was even better to me. She put me up in the house behind the Comedy Store. So the Comedy Store was my living room. So I was there every night, and I saw the greatest comics in the world. Plus, I got
Wow.
on every night.
So there
Um,
was a house because I've been to the store. I was there actually like last March, right before the pandemic. I was like so lucky to be able to like perform there a couple times before things got weird. Was it behind the store or was it
you know what the
like
parking lot is, and
yes.
if you're facing the back of the parking lot, just on the other side of the wall, it was Errol Flynn's house, and Mitzi
Wow.
owned that house, and her daughter lived there. And there was another floor on it, and me and this guy Tom lived there. Mitzi was so kind to me; she put me up, and I didn't have a place to stay. She was so good to me, and she made sure that I worked every night. I pretty much and Tom, who was my roommate, ran the door at the club, so I mean, the booking door kind of thing. So if someone was late or didn't show, Tom would go, Eddie, get your ass over here. They need
Ooh.
someone in the OR. They need someone in the main room. Can you do a set in the belly room? So there were weeks where I did 3 slots a day, 7 days a week.
Oh, that's so good.
So I got
Wow.
so much work, and and the people I met, like Taylor Negron, for instance, he was such a good improver, and I approached him about how to play on stage, and he took me under his wing. And then Robert Schimmel, who was one of my favorite comedians, I met him at the store. I was actually hitting on his sister. I didn't know it was his sister, and
Sister Schimmel.
yeah, Sister Schimmel. And so I was talking to her and chatting her up, and all of a sudden they go, ladies and gentlemen, Robert Schimmel. I go, excuse me, I want to watch this guy. He's my favorite. She goes, that's my brother. I went, what?
Wow.
So she introduced me to Robert, and then he took me on the road with him all over the country. And then Dennis Leary, who was my roommate in college, he, had a baby.
What college did you go to?
Emerson.
Where is that? Is that upstate New York?
In Boston.
Oh, wow. Okay, Boston. So many comics at it. Are you from Boston?
No, I'm from Brooklyn.
Okay.
So I went to college for 4 years in Boston, started stand-up in Boston, and it was a pretty good Emerson we had before our class. Leno and Henry Winkler and Andrea Martin and Bill Dana and Norman Lear and all these incredible comedians. While I was in college, it was me and Stephen Wright, Mario Cantone, and Lauren Dombrowski, who not only was a great comedian, but head writer at Mad TV. And all of us were friends, and we made sure that each other got work. And then after us was Dave Cross and Anthony Clark and Bill Burr and Jen Kirkman, and it's just on and on and on. Laura Keitlinger. So it was a great, Emerson was great for comedy, and we had, we were taking over the stages. It was really great. And then Dennis went over to England to do a TV show. His wife gave birth prematurely and had a baby there, so they had to live there. So I went over to visit, and I went on at the Comedy Store there, which is no affiliation. Did well at the Comedy Store, and then I started becoming a regular in Europe. And that's when I left LA, because LA, there was too many drugs. I loved the drugs that I did back then, but I stopped after a while.
Which ones?
All of them. All of them. I did them all.
I feel sometimes I was born in the wrong decade. Like, I feel like I'm somebody, given the right friend group, would also do all the drugs.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like a why not gal.
Yeah, I was a why not guy. I just never did it before I worked. I didn't.
Yeah, that is what I don't understand. Man, like, it's I mean, obviously, like, we could have a whole podcast just on like times being different now. But I was on McDougal Street last night doing a set at one of the I don't want to make it super obvious like who I'm talking about, but like I was doing a set in that area. There's a lot of clubs in that area, and I noticed I got off the subway at Bleecker Street, walked all the way down Bleecker Street to get to McDougal, and just that walk, that Bleecker walk, which is like it's a long couple of blocks. It's like you're getting close to like the NYU living, and I was blown away with not only how many stores were shut down. That's when I really noticed, like, oh man, because I hadn't been in that area, which is like a comedy hub, probably since last year. So I was like, okay, this really feels different. And then I get to McDougal, same thing. A lot of the cute little cutesy corner, like NYU, like little restaurants, like the students would keep these places going, and the tourists, so many of them were out. And then I saw this comic. I think he was a comic. I think he may have also like been a barker for like one or more of the clubs down there. But I was like, oh, I said hi to him, and I was like, oh, maybe he's a little drunk. He was like, I'll talk to you later. And I was like, okay. And then I went into my set. I came out, and he was in a chair, like slumped over. And I was like, is he tired? It took me so long. I was talking to some of my other friends, like same thing, had bumped into people I hadn't seen in a long time. And we were like, is he drunk or is that something else? And like my buddy was like, yeah, no, that's something else. And I was like, oh, like, what do we do? Do we move him? And then this other comic was like, oh no, I've seen him like that about 7 times now. And it's
so sad.
It was, my heart like broke. And this is just an acquaintance, but I was just like, oh, what do you do? Like, it's the same thing. It's been a long year and change for people.
Yeah, and it's a lot of depression and and it's understandable, for a lot of people. And even in the days that I did drugs, we did, in college, I tried everything. I really did. And then I kind of stopped, and I mostly smoked pot. And, every once in a while I'd get Coke, but I would never do it the most cocaine I did was in the late 80s, in the Kinnison days of the Comedy Store, because it was flowing like a fountain and it was just always there. And it was a million stars and it was really great. But before then, I ran a club in New York. I had a chance. I quit comedy for a while. After Boston, I had quit stand up. I thought that was great, but I need a real career. And came to New York and was in advertising. And an opportunity came in 1984 to start a comedy club in the Village. I opened it. It was called the Paper Moon. And I brought in all the comedians who weren't not in the clique of New York. They're like, I'd bring in, all like Dennis Miller and, Wendy Liebman and Colin Quinn and, all the people I knew from Boston. And who else was there? There's so many great comedians that were there. Brett Butler and Susie Essman, Adam Sandler. Adam was going to NYU down the street.
Wow.
Paper Moon was on 3rd Street and Thompson. And I gave the club away to Barry Katz because I wanted to move to LA because Mitzi said, come out to LA. And that became the Boston Comedy Club. So I started that room.
Oh, wow.
The Paper Moon was pre-Boston Comedy Club. So what happened was that our comedy was downstairs in that venue. And the owners were real short-sighted and put the comedy upstairs. The comedy was sold out every show. And I had these amazing shows with these amazing comedians. I have some of the lists of the names of the people. They're amazing before they were ever famous. And the Comedy Cellar was down the street, and they were doing fine without us. They weren't worried that we were taking away their business. In fact, somebody would, if I'd need a last-minute replacement, they'd run over from the cellar. It was really, really great. And then the comedy upstairs wasn't as great. And then when I gave it to Barry, if you've ever been to the Boston Comedy Club or watched Crashing or all that kind of stuff, that upstairs room was good, but it wasn't as great as the room we built for comedy downstairs. So that's when I was just like, I got sick of, it was a shame. And when I went to LA, it was just like movie stars and porn stars and, comedy, Richard Pryor and Roseanne Barr and all these. It was just great. And then afterwards, there'd be drug parties. It was good. And I just said, you know what? I really need to have my own career and not be off the coattails and doing the drugs with these people. And that thing happened in London, and it made me a better and I left LA and I moved back to New York, and I was closer to being in England and Ireland and Australia and all that stuff. And so that really changed my life in a great way. I sort of, not sobered up, but I stopped partying as much. And then the Letterman job came in, and that was amazing. And so it's been, I work really hard, and it pays off, and I still work hard, and I still love stand-up, and I missed it so much during the pandemic. I did another show on Friday night in Florida, and in a theater. It was just like,
ooh, where in Florida?
In Miami, the Miami area.
Okay, cool.
And it was really great. And it just, of all the great things I've done in my life, and I've really been blessed to do these amazing things, doing stand-up still my favorite. And I couldn't sleep that night because I just did 45 minutes in a beautiful theater to human beings in the same room.
And that was your first 45 in like a long time? Like, had you done shorter sets?
I did a 30 before then at the Broadway Comedy Club. And that was really fun. Me and Anita Wise were on the show, and we were both a little nervous. Now, Anita was one of my best friends. Me, Colin, and her used to travel a lot, and she was the coolest of all of us. She had done the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. So she was nervous. And I said, well, what are you being nervous? She goes, why are you nervous? Because we hadn't put our feet on stage in front of other people. And it went fine. But it's interesting how much we love it and how our heart beats to it.
Oh, yeah. I sometimes try to break down, like, man, how much of this is like for ego? How much of it, like, you have moments that feel like big ego moments. And then you have moments where you're like, no, this is about connection. Like, I really want a room full of people to forget about their own problems, laugh at me and my problems, or just laugh at something else, especially after like people are like feel like so unsure of things in life right now, especially like over the last year, and folks losing people and just like being scared.
Right, but look at 9/11. After 9/11, everybody came back. It's different, But it's not our job to make everyone better, but it's really a really one. I remember the first show I did after 9/11 at the Stress Factory. It was like the 19th of September, and the sound of the laughter was so loud because people needed to laugh. I never heard a
Yeah, it's like a
sound that
pressure
loud
release.
before.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happened the last couple of times I've done stand up again. People just feel it's so important, and it just drives me to keep doing and doing. Now I've been booking shows like I listened to your, the pre-show where you're mentioning the intro where you're mentioning all the shows. I'm like, yeah, comedy, comedy, comedy.
Yeah. Oh, it's so exciting. I was really fortunate to not have that big of a break. Like, I think, yeah, it went down. Actually, LA was one of the last shows I did. And then it was Philly. The Philly Comedy Club was Comedians of the Compound. They did not give a fuck. Things were already starting to shut down. Philly people were
Right.
like, nah, we're
Yeah.
good. That was a really great show. And then it wasn't until maybe like June that the backyards shows, the secret shows started to pop up. Just doing sets like not as often as before, but like enough. And I'm seeing friends like the Compound Media fans all the time. So you're
Right.
not feeling that out of it. And I liked still being kind of like in the mix. And yeah, like my first couple of headlining sets, I was like, woo! It just felt like you're on a
Yeah.
bike drunk and you're just like, you have your material. And then you're like, but how am I going to get there?
Yeah, but you do it because that's what we do. It's just natural for us to be able to do that. And I've learned a lot of things. Every year I learn new things, and one of the big ones is how there was a from Finland. One of the many podcasts I've done, and it was called "We're Not Here to Please You" was the name of the podcast, and that
Ooh.
that the name just lit with stuck with me, and I realized something. We're not here to please people. That's not our job. And I've been doing a not every now on Clubhouse at 9 o'clock every Sunday night.
Yeah, you got into Clubhouse? I signed up for it, but I'm just like, all right, it's just people shouting, like
Yeah, I didn't want to be part of the people shouting, but I wanted to create a show. So I created a show, an hour show like this, but it's all audio. And I've interviewed Susie Essman and Brian Regan and Stephen Wright and Bill Burr, Henry
wow.
Winkler, Larry Charles, and I had Dick Cavett on this past Sunday. So I'm bringing the best
Cool.
names in all of comedy. I got Robert Klein to say yes, and
Wow.
Wendy Liebman is next week, and so it's all major stars of either stand up or writing or producing, and again, it's just people, and everyone is kind of said, especially Brian Regan said it a couple of weeks ago. He said, "I'm not out there trying to kiss the audience's ass or please them. I'm doing what makes me laugh, and if they like it, that's great." And that's given, like somebody said, "Oh, Chappelle, when he does this material, I go, he's not here to please you. If you don't like Chappelle, go watch somebody else."
Yeah.
That attitude has my act is even much better and stronger and more alluring, I think, to people because I've taken it upon myself to just have a backbone and not try to kiss people's ass.
So over time, you feel like you give less fucks. You're not somebody who's like, well, I can't lose money, I can't lose opportunity, so I better cater to the woke mob.
No, I won't. And I grew up very poor, so money never was the issue for me. As long as I have enough to pay my bills, really, that's it's nice to have more money and to do fun things with money, but it's never been the thing. It doesn't drive me. If I've done gigs where I made no money and it's like the most amazing gigs.
Oh, yeah.
I remember the first gig I ever did for a lot of money. I was working in Reno at the comedy club, and there was a private dentist's meeting or whatever, and the guy who was booking the club said, I'll give you, it's a $10,000 check. I'll give you 8,000 if you do the party." And I was shitting my pants. I never heard
Wow.
about that much money in my life, or seen it or touched it or whatever. And I was a young comic, and I went on stage, and I was having the time of my life. Everything was working. I was laughing. I was ad libbing. I was playing. I was having as much fun as they were having. And it was so good. And at one point, I just put my hand in my pocket, and I felt the check in my hand. And I just smiled, that extra smile that, wow, I'm getting paid to do what I love, and I'm loving it. And I would have done this for nothing, but don't tell them,
Hmm.
you know?
Do you ever feel like this is an interesting comment in the chat? So I want to know your thoughts. But aren't comics literally on stage to tell jokes and entertain? Hmm.
Literally, no, comics are on stage to, I mean, you entertain people in order to be able to be a great entertainer, you have to have the attitude. Look, I've written this material because it makes me laugh,
And you believe in
and I
it.
find it funny. And if you find it funny, that's really great. And a lot of audience members would have that response or shock, like, "No, aren't you here for my? You're supposed to dance for me, monkey
Yes.
boy." You know, but no, that's not what most comedians end up doing. So many comedians. One thing I learned about Europe, about America by going to Europe, was how much American comedians pander to audiences.
Ooh, interesting.
Like, so much so. Like, hey, give yourselves a round of applause for coming out tonight. Why would we applaud ourselves for going out? We've been out before. We know how to go out. We don't have to applaud ourselves. You just want a cheap applause because you don't know how to get the laughter you need from the audience. Well, hey, let's hear it for the troops. Fuck you. You're not in the troops. They're doing hard work and you're getting an applause break because the
Yeah,
troops.
the troops aren't here right now.
Yeah,
Like if you're doing
and no one
yeah.
hates the troops.
Right.
There's, it's just like kissing the audience's ass to try to get them to like you, which is what I did as a young comedian, what I've done in my life as a human, trying to get people to like me. You do that insecurity, that thing you started talking about earlier, and then you realize, no, you know what's more alluring to me is someone who has a backbone, someone who has an idea of their own, someone who's really talented and really creative. Like if I'm watching Stevie Wonder in concert and I'm not going, well, he's supposed to do that for me. No, he's up there jamming on something that he came up with. And I just happen to think it's amazing. And that's even better. But yeah, when I first was in England, I told the MC, the compere, I said, he said to me, I went up to him to give my intro and I gave him, this little impressive list of stuff. And he looked at me like, fuck you. And I was like, what? And then he brought me up without saying anything, not even from America, you know. And
Wow.
luckily I did well because that was my audition set for the Comedy Store in London. Later on in the week, we got to get closer because I was hanging out with him. And I said, what was that shit when we first met? You're so nice. And I thought you were an asshole. And he said, well, you were an asshole. You came up to me and started bragging about your career. And I said, I wasn't bragging about my career. I was giving you my intro. He goes, intro? Why would you tell people in advance about how great you are? If you're funny, you're funny. How many people do you know that have TV
Wow.
shows that suck? And how many comedians that have specials on their own? And they're not great comedians. They just happen to have a lucky set, or they happen to know a manager who is booking something.
Yep.
So just
Yep.
go up there and do your act, and don't try to tell audiences, well, here's all the great shows I've been in.
Wow.
And it was like such a shock.
So you think that's a more European thing, is to not give credits? Just be
Yeah.
like, here's Eddie. All right,
Yeah.
enjoy, buddy.
Yeah. You're on the show. They're not gonna book you if you're not funny.
Wow. Okay.
They do guest spots on the weekend, which is really cool. And they call it an open spot. Well, if you're in an open spot, the audience is like on your side. They want you to do well, and they'll tell you it's an open spot. And the audience expect that. But if you're on the Comedy Store in the London weekend, you're one of the best comics on the planet.
Whoa. And
Yeah.
you did that.
It was really fun to be part of it.
Wow. And I don't remember this full story, but I remember hearing about it vaguely and being like, ugh, that's annoying. And I think this might have been before I met you, before I came to the poker game. But I remember hearing something and like, yeah, just fill in the gaps for me. But like, weren't you like an early person that like the sort of cancel mob came after? Like, didn't you get shit for not being supposedly diverse enough talent booker?
What happened was that there was a very mediocre reporter who was really, who had an agenda on their mind, and they wanted to talk about how come there were not more female comics on Letterman. And I said, well, there are female comics on Letterman, and I'm booking them. And I just put Karen Runtowski and gave her network television debut, and I fought for Paula Poundstone to put her on the show. And I love female comics, and Joan Rivers helped me with my first Letterman spot. And when I ran a comedy club, I always had female comics, and it wasn't just one. There's a lot of people just put one female, and having all two female. I never really cared. I put on, and he said, well, there's not many on. There was only one this year. I said, well, lately I've been getting a lot of tapes where these female comics were acting like these misogynistic male comics who would never get on Letterman. And I think that these people should be authentic. Not all female comics should be authentic and are not authentic. And I would give the same advice I would give to male comics, that you should be authentic. That's how you get on television. That's how you make these shows. Well, they made it sound, and they said so. And then I guess Amy Schumer had said, Eddie Brill only books men, middle-aged white men from the Midwest. Now, I gave that guy the list of the names of the comics that were on that year, and that didn't match what Amy said yet. He put her quote in there, like it, and gave it some weight. But there was Kumail Nanjiani making his network television debut, and Joe Wong from China, and a lot of African American comics. And,
wow.
And they don't know. I'm only putting 12 to 20 comics on a year. Sometimes there's more men and sometimes there's more women, and that's just the way it is. So all of a sudden, it came out in the paper that I was, I said women should be more authentic. I didn't say women should be more authentic. I never said, and it never came out in the article, that I didn't like female comics or anything. If you look at my history, if you looked at other articles that were written about me where I was interviewed saying, that women comics are fantastic, and that their problem is the men who are very insecure, who are afraid of powerful women, and that's why you see less women in comedy clubs. But I grew up with my mom was the funniest person in our house, and all the women in my life were these strong, hilarious women. So it was just a bullshit thing that happened, and this guy was very irresponsible, because if he really cared, he wouldn't have put Amy Schumer's statement in there, because he had the list of the comedians, and it didn't match what she had said. And I wasn't mad about the female thing, because I knew what I had said and what I had meant. And I was mad at, I can't remember his name. He's a kind of a comic who wouldn't be on the Letterman show because he talks about rape and there's all this other kind of stuff. And that's not going on at 11:30 in prime time. And he had said some nasty things in the article, and I was more concerned about that, which was, a lot of bullshit. So Letterman at the time admitted to me all this to me later, but he was in the paper for not having any female writers on the show.
Oh, wow.
And he also was in the paper for having an affair with his, not his intern, but his assistant.
Oh, I tried so hard to get an internship.
It was the last thing they wanted was another controversy. So instead of backing me up, which they apologized later,
for not doing.
Yeah, they figured the best way to do is to take action, and they kept me there. They just didn't let me book the comics. But they also didn't say that there was, and I won't mention anybody's names, I booked a bunch of female comics that are tried to, and they were turned down by producers. Now, the other part about that is that all the producers and the booker of the show were females. So if I was misogynistic or a prick, they wouldn't have let me do the job for 11 years, because all the producers and the booker of the show were female. And, we had discussions about female comics, and, so I really I couldn't believe it. It was like I was being so good to comedians and fighting comedians, and it's like getting arrested for helping someone cross the street, and you get arrested for wrinkling their shirt.
Wow. And what year was this?
It was 2012. And the guy said he interviewed me at the end of 2011, and he said, if I have any follow-up questions, I'll call you. And he didn't have any follow-up. If he really thought I felt this way, he could have asked me, I'm going to put this out in the paper. Do you think that women are not as authentic as men? I would have said, I never said that. Show me in the interview where I said it. And I just said these 4 recent tapes I got were of women who were acting like misogynistic males, and males we wouldn't put on the show either.
Yeah, because I have seen that in like my 11 years of comedy. It's like women go, okay, they see these certain men make it. Maybe they see an Amy Schumer who made it. Some say she made it by being kind of like lewd and sexual with her material. And they go, oh, well, that's what wins. So let me try to emulate that. And instead of following their own voice, like maybe they are more soft spoken, maybe they are like, okay, maybe they're a mom, or maybe they're like an introvert. Like, you need to, at the end of the day, like write about what you know, because the audience can tell when you're not being authentic.
Right. And we had Paula Poundstone on the show, and we had, I don't want to mention names by their sexuality. We had lesbian comics on the show and all kinds of female comics. I helped put Carmen Lynch on the show and Corey Kahaney. And, I was working with 6 comics that were coming up. 4 of them were women that were going to be in it. 2 female comics I had booked that year were turned down by the producers. I mean, I wasn't running the show and telling the show, here are the comedians, put them on, or else, I was part of a team. But, I took and it hurt me because it gave me a weird, there were some women like Wendy Liebman, who's my friend, who I put on the show. She said, what do you mean by women should be more or are more authentic? I go, Wendy, you know me better than that. I meant that every comic should be more authentic, and that's how they get on the show.
Hold on. I'm smirking because the dumb dog is barking. He's like, there's a stupid laundry basket in the way. She can't just jump over it. Oh my God. Sorry. I also heard her like going. I know she was going through my bag. Like she likes to eat paper and swallow it. I was like, she's probably tearing up a joke notebook.
Nah, great.
Yeah. Okay. So you've met so many like legendary comics. Who surprised you over the years? Like, yeah, the people that were on Letterman or just that you've performed with. Who surprised you pleasantly and who was a dick?
Oh, I don't want to say who was a dick.
Ah.
Yeah, I know. I never want to do that, but because we all know who the dicks are. I mean, I was really impressed with Roy Wood Jr. He was someone who really,
he is so talented and what a nice guy.
And also one of a kind, just one of a kind. When I was growing up as a comic, Paula Poundstone taught me how to work the crowd and how to do that. So to me, she's the greatest live stand-up I've ever seen. Sorry, she's a female.
Right. You should have mentioned that up top. Yeah.
Yeah. But I thought Roy Wood was really special. I thought Camille was really special right away. It's so hard to say. There was a whole bunch. Nick Griffin was just this odd, funny, talking about divorce when no one was talking about divorce comedy on the show. But Letterman liked smart and silly. So. Like a lot of people don't know who Karen Rentowski is, but she is very silly and very funny. And she has this one joke where she says, I wear these Santa panties and even when I'm down, it's always Christmas in my shorts or Christmas in my pants. And that was a very Letterman kind of a thing. There was a few comics who were real, like Tommy Johnigan. Letterman really loved him because
Clean
he had
cut,
that silly style. And then Joe Wong is the most successful story I had, a Chinese comic from China who was going to quit comedy the night I auditioned him for Letterman. And I ended up putting him on 3 or 4 years later. And some of the producers at the show didn't think he was funny, but I thought he was brilliant. And he went on, and not only did he blew the roof off the joint of Letterman, Letterman signed him the next day to a deal. What? Ellen DeGeneres grabbed him to be on the red carpet for the Emmys. Biden called him to do the Correspondents' Dinner. He just got Rory Rosegarten to be his manager, and then I was interviewed more in all the Chinese newspapers from China, how we gave a Chinese comedian a break, and he tore it up. And so, and he told me years later, he said, if you didn't, the night I auditioned for you, if I didn't get it, I was going to probably quit comedy. And now he's like one of the biggest stars in China.
Wow. And so he's going to quit and open a dry cleaner or something.
Yeah, or a wet cleaners. Be different, You get all the stuff back and it's soaking wet. It's like, what's this?
Hey, you didn't say to dry it. Oh, we got a super chat from Ghost Crusaders. Chrissy works her butt off. Thumbs up to the video. Aw, thanks, buddy.
Very
appreciate you. Okay, cool. So Eddie's not here to talk shit. No, I love it. I appreciate it. Who turned down doing comedy on Letterman, or who is somebody that you kind of were trying to get on and for whatever reason they wouldn't do it?
A couple, like I remember George Wallace, who was very good to me. It was a young comic. He couldn't do it because he was doing a movie. That's really the only person. Everyone else said yes. I asked Wanda Sykes like the second week I had the job, and I didn't hear back from her. So I guess I can't speak for her, but me, her, and Greg Giraldo used to do a lot of shows together, and I I wanted to put the three of us on, not the three of us, but the two of them. And Greg did it, but she didn't.
Maybe she was waiting for you to book more women.
Yeah, maybe. She was going to be the second comic I booked.
Oh man,
Yeah,
interesting.
Andy Kindler was going to be first.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. How much pressure did you get from CBS slash Letterman himself on who to book and who not to book?
I watched the show. It was 33 years on television, so I kind of knew what the comics Letterman liked, and him and I talked about a bunch. And at the very beginning, I had looked at some, I had looked at some video with him. I brought it in, and we started talking about who to book. So we were on the same page, you know. I put some pretty edgy comics on, like Bill Burr and Jim Norton and Nick DiPaolo and stuff. And he probably didn't, he always had edgy comics on the show. And edgy doesn't mean dirty or cursing. It means that really smart and different and unique. And I think that he was really happy that I got to put some of these people on the show and have them do the job. And even though when they go to the clubs, they're talking about pissing on themselves or, something else or whatever. So I think, there were certain things they couldn't talk about, but I brought a lot of international comedians to the show. Tommy Tiernan from Ireland, Harry Hill from England. There was another guy, his name slipped my mind, from India, who actually lived in Australia at the time. Danny Boy was his name, Bhoy. So the show was really happy that I was really bringing an international flair to the show as well as the other comics. They were happy with me. The head booker of the show, Sheila, used to tell me all the time how she liked the comics and that, I took chances and they appreciated it. But it just came to that one time and all of a sudden they were like, check please.
Oh
And then
gosh.
later they all apologized to me, but it was too late by then. They all
You're like, it was too late. The
Yeah.
grudge was held.
I know. I would have probably done things differently knowing what I know now, but at the time I was shocked, shocked by the
What
whole
would
thing.
you have done differently?
I would have told them that, look, if you don't back me, I'm going to just walk because I've done
Been
everything.
good by you. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done the job and I've done it for 17. At that time, it was like 15 years or 14 years. And I think I would have done it differently. But in retrospect, how are you going to look back at that time? I, might have even called the report. I tried to call the reporter out and they turned those words around on me as
Yeah,
well.
because they had their narrative already. They didn't
Yeah.
need your pesky facts getting in the way.
I should have. The problem is, and I own this, is that I should have never done the interview without asking the show before. But I've done literally thousands of interviews, and no one has ever been. People get quotes wrong and this wrong, but no one ever had a vendetta. No one ever came with an agenda before. And I thought, well, this is the New York Times. I'm going to be in the Times, and Letterman's going to love it because he read the Times and he was going to be so proud of me that I got this article. I was just on CBS this morning and I was on a roll and I thought, here we go. And then boom.
Do you wonder if this was like a surly ex-comic or something? Because that seems to be like the comedy journalists now are ones that are like soured, like they couldn't make it or they are currently actively sucking. Those seem to be the ones that do the most comedy journalism.
Well, this person was never a comic. So what can you do? They never a comic and the article wasn't factual. So it was weird. But there was one comic and who wouldn't, when I was booking it, didn't want me to work on the segment with her. And I said, okay, because I didn't work with every comic, like Seinfeld would do the show and, some other major guests and Ellen would do the show and they didn't know who I was. I was a young comic who was booking the show. So they wanted to work with the producers. So when this other comic said they didn't want to work with me, I wasn't offended. She just didn't know me. So she does the show and she kind of bombs and they wouldn't let her back. And then a year later, her management begged her to get back on the show again. And they said, okay. And she said, I'll even work with Eddie. So I worked with her and she was very pleasant. And
work with Eddie.
Yeah, isn't that nice? And then so we put a set together. It was really fun and funny. This is a pro comic. It's a great comic. And she went out and she changed her set during the set.
Whoa.
Which you can't do because we've already got everything approved through the networks and the standards and practices and everything, and the set wasn't very good. And
Why did she change in the middle like that?
she I don't know. Only she can explain it. So
Mhm.
so
Just
they told her
panicked.
they
Yeah.
told her you can never be on the show again. And then when the paper came out, she jumped all over that. It was Eddie Brill. He's the one who,
Ugh. Oh my God.
she stepped in her own shit and couldn't take it, so she blamed it on me. And then she was really writing it up in all the articles and papers
Oh,
about
man, that
that.
sucks. So then she really burned a bridge with you.
She said, I asked Eddie Brill if I can have a spot, and he said he was saving it for himself. Which, first of all, I never talked to her again, and if I did think that, why would I tell her? And
Hmm.
thirdly, she was told she couldn't do the show anymore anyway. So it's just there are bad people out there, and what are you going to do?
Have you been reading up about what's been happening to Jeff Singer? He was the kind of like primary booker for New Faces for JFL. He has been the whole time I've been doing comedy.
Yeah,
But he's been, I guess, effectively, in a sense, from at least a public relations marketing standpoint, canceled from that job. I mean, there had been whispers that really it hadn't been him for the last few years, that really Rebecca Trent had been doing the bulk of the booking. But yeah, like a lot of people came after him, like, oh, he was homophobic or he was misogynist. And I look at that and I go, or he just didn't like you. Like, and
yeah.
perhaps
I don't know
it's
what happened. I knew Jeff back in the day. He seemed like a good guy to comics. I was around him when he was around comics, but people said he wasn't, and I don't know how that happened. I haven't spoken to him, so I need to talk to him to. Yeah, when I read about it, I felt really sad. But if he said what he said, if he was a bad guy, then he
mm,
deserves what he gets. But if he's not, it should, I mean, Rebecca Trent, I think, is brilliant, and I'm glad that she's involved in any booking, because I have always, she's not everyone loves her because she's a booker. Well, you learn, like, when you're the booker, you can be the nicest person in the world, and people will hate you. People will say, people will have met me and have said, "You're so nice. I thought you were a dick," and
uh,
just because people, as you said, some people. What changing just a little bit, not the subject, but when I would book comics, I wanted a booker who was the booker that I wanted if I was auditioning. So I would go to auditions in other cities instead of letting them come to New York or LA. I go to other cities. When the show was over, I took notes through the whole show, and I'd offer the notes after the show, and so a comic wouldn't go to bed that night not knowing how they did. And I
wow.
thought that was such a cool move because that's what I wanted. And it turns out people just wanted to hear I got the show. And if I gave them
Mm,
any notes, like, fuck him, what does he know about anything? So you can be the nicest person in the world, and there's always people who hate you. So I don't know if people hated Singer and called him out.
hmm.
You know, I read that some people said he had doubled down on using the N word, and I don't know. I've only known what I read, and knowing about having people write about you, I know that a lot of times it could be bullshit.
And once it's like, look, everyone's piling on this person. Oh, great. Anybody who's ever been rejected for JFL, like, here's your time to shine. You could
Right.
completely make something up and you're going to get attention for it. Like, somebody said that he just didn't like seeing female comics on stage wearing like skirts and boots, like that
Yeah.
skirt boot combo. But I'm like, well, here's the thing is too, like, bookers are also human beings. There's no way you're going to be completely objective if you don't like that style, or if you don't like a certain type of anything. Like, well, guess what, they're the booker and they're human, and sometimes someone won't like you for a completely personal reason that has nothing to do with your talent, work ethic, anything like that. It'll be the dumbest, most
There was a
shallow
guy at our
thing.
poker. There was a guy at our poker game who one time ran out of money, and we lent him money. He was going to run to the ATM, and he just ran home and never came back and never gave us the money. So we shit on him all the time. Well, he booked something in the Caribbean now, and I asked them to do it, and
Oh,
he
Ray.
won't book me. He said, I'm a very international comic because I work all over the world, and this is a perfect gig for me. But he won't. He won't book
So
me
he
because
lost. He was going to the ATM to get the money to pay everybody, and then he
he
just
just
scampered
continued
off.
home, never came back. And I guess we made fun of him a lot for doing that. We didn't hate him or anything, but I don't know if that's his reasoning. But he won't really return my calls. about working this gig down in wherever.
Ray Allen, right? Ray, if you're listening,
Yeah,
pay up, buddy.
yeah. I said I wouldn't talk bad about anybody, but I
No, I
really,
mean,
I
also,
really
how many
wanted.
people book a gig in the Caribbean?
Yeah, I really wanted to do that gig because all my friends do it, and I love the Caribbean and I love scuba diving. So
It does look really good.
yeah,
Yeah. It looks like fun for sure. That's so interesting. And then you were on Louie, the FX show,
yeah.
and I guess you probably worked pretty closely
I
with.
worked. I was, I was the host the first time Louis did stand up.
Oh wow, where was that?
He was very funny right away, very silly, very funny.
What club?
In Boston, I think it was Stitches. I don't remember in my mind. I think it was Stitches, but it could have been Played Again Sam's. I forgot which one. But when I moved back to New York. I got a job warming up the Dana Carvey show, and Louis was one of the head producers, writers of the show. And then when that show was canceled, Louis went over to Letterman, and Letterman was looking for a warm up, and Louis recommended me. So I got the Letterman gig, and a thanks to Louis for
Wow.
doing that. And then, of course, he put me in his show, and we almost won an Emmy Award for that episode because it was pretty special. And I only have good feelings about him as a human and one of the best comedians in the history of comedy. And I don't want to spend an hour. I don't have actually run out of overtime,
But
but
yes, all right, you have to go.
I don't want to. I could stay another like 3 to 5 minutes.
We'll have to do this again, Eddie. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I forgot you have a hard out. Eddie, we'll have to do this again. There's so much to talk about. Where can people find you and follow you and all that good stuff?
Well, every Sunday night at Clubhouse at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I have a show, and the guests are spectacular. Wendy Liebman's next, and there's Robert Klein and Louis Black, and who else said yes for next month? Louis Anderson. They're
Ooh,
all going
look
to
at
be.
you.
Yeah, I know. I'm pulling out the favorites
Crushing
and they're
it.
coming in. And we had Larry Charles the other week, and Dick Cavett, and Henry Winkler, and we're going to have a lot of it's going to be that's a great fun thing. I'm very proud of. I'm on Twitter at Eddie_Brill. I'm on Instagram at Eddie Comic, so you can find me at those places, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to really talk with the crowd. We just pissed off one person who was pissed that I wasn't pleasing the audience. But
Oh yeah, it's okay. We'll have to do this again. You have so much more cool stories, and
yeah,
I
and I'm
want to
really
get in with
glad. I
you.
mean, I really have a lot of respect for you, and always have, and
Oh
I just love watching you be so successful. And
wow.
you're really you're your own person, and I admire that and respect that. And I'm not pissed I didn't be on the show. I just am excited
I know. I
that I
know.
finally got asked to be on the show.
For how great you are, I should have had you on sooner. You know what I mean? So
I'm better now than I was yesterday. So
okay, good.
that's what I would say.
I'll have you back on. Eddie, thank you so much for coming on. You're the
My
best.
pleasure.
Talk to you
All right.
soon.
Have a safe trip. I'll talk to you soon.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.